Hey folks, this is a continuation of the discussion on conic sections, and this video's discussion is going to be about the ellipse. So if you could go down in your notes, please, to the section on ellipse. You'll notice that the center of the ellipse is going to be HK. This should, by now, sound very familiar to you because all of the conic sections have an HK on them. In your picture, I did not actually write down what the center was, but you see that the HK is marked. It's the big red dot in the center. So let's name some of the other parts on these two pictures. One thing to point out, you'll notice I have two ellipses here. One of them is a horizontal ellipse and the other one is a vertical ellipse. This is going to make a difference, especially when we get down a little lower to our standard equations. But first, let's go ahead and label some of the parts. The first thing that I'd like to label is going to be the vertex. Notice that the vertex is going to be at the long end of the ellipse. I did not mark all of the vertices on both ellipses, but there are going to be two for each. The second thing that I would like for you to pay attention to is going to be the focus points. In this case, the focus points are going to be purple on these two pictures. There are two focus points. Two focus points could also be called two foci. So that's another way to say the same word in the plural version. The third thing to point your attention out to is going to be the ends of the minor axis. Now, I haven't mentioned yet what the minor axis is, so let me go ahead and do that. The minor axis is the short axis. The major axis is going to be the long axis. The vertices are going to be at the end of the major axis, and the minor axis has ends of the minor axis, but we don't have a special point for those. So I know I did mark the major axis here on both of these. So those are all the parts of the ellipse. The standard equations, you have two of these. You've got x minus h quantity squared over a squared plus y minus k quantity squared over b squared is equal to 1. That particular standard equation goes for the horizontal ellipse. The vertical ellipse looks almost identical. So take a look at it for a second. What exactly is different about those? And you're right, it's going to be that the a squared and the b squared, they're going to be traded. So what I want to point out to you here is that the a squared, which is always going to be on the major axis, a squared is always on the major axis, it's going to be, in our first equation, it's under the x's, and my ellipse runs along the x direction. In my second ellipse, that a, that longer value, is going to be underneath my y's, and you'll notice that my ellipse is running vertically along the y's. So whatever the larger denominator is, that's how you're going to determine which direction your ellipse is. And so if the larger denominator is under x's, it's going to be horizontal, and if your larger denominator is under the y's, it's going to be vertical. Now, for your question on this particular video, I'd like you to write this down and be ready to turn it in. Please list the 5 points that are on the major axis. Please list the 5 points that are on the major axis. Now, let's talk about that major axis here for just a moment. The major axis is the longer axis. It's made up by an a plus an a, and it has 5 special points on it, which I did just ask you to write down what those 5 points are. The minor axis is going to be the shorter axis, and it's made up of 2 b's. Distance a is always going to extend from the center to the vertex. Distance b always extends from the center to the end of the minor axis. Distance c always extends from the center to the focus. I have a little formula here that I tend in class to call little dude. This is not an official statement for this, but that's what I call him in class. So my little dude equation is going to be a squared minus b squared equals c squared. The reason that you would need this equation is anytime you're going to work with the foci, you're going to need little dude. 3 important statements to make for you to get used to hearing, get used to seeing them, and get very familiar with them. First of all, the vertices are always going to be A away from the center. Secondly, the ends of the minor axis are always going to be B away from the center. And then thirdly, the foci are always going to be C away from the center.